The crystal city of Harmony's End sparkled like a jewel against the purple sky of Cathara Prime. Its towers reached high into the clouds, each one grown from pure crystal over thousands of years. The Cathara people moved through the streets like living gemstones, their bodies made of the same beautiful crystal as their homes. They had lived in peace for millions of years, creating art and music that could make other beings weep with joy. But today, the city was dying. Resonance of Hope stood at the highest window of the central spire, watching the horizon with growing fear. Dark shapes moved across the land like a disease, eating everything in their path. The Devourers had come to Cathara Prime 3 days ago, and already half the planet was gone. The Devourers looked like giant metal boxes with legs, each one the size of a building. They moved slowly but never stopped. When they touched something, it simply disappeared, consumed to make more of themselves. Trees, rocks, animals, even other Cathara. Everything became food for these terrible machines. How many cities have we lost? Asked Memory of Songs, her crystal body flickering with sadness. 17 major cities and 43 smaller settlements, Resonance of Hope replied. His voice carried the sound of breaking glass. At this rate, we have perhaps 3 days before they reach the last safe zones. The Cathara had tried everything. Their best scientists had built energy weapons, but the Devourers simply changed their metal skin to absorb the blasts. They had tried sending radio signals to confuse the machines, but the Devourers adapted to each new frequency. They had even tried reasoning with them, thinking perhaps these beings could be bargained with. But the Devourers never responded to anything except the urge to consume. What about the other worlds? Memory of Songs asked. Have any of them answered our calls for help? Resonance of Hope's light grew dimmer. The Altarian hegemony says they cannot risk their fleets. The Vegan Republic has offered to take refugees, but their ships cannot carry even 1% of our population. The Centauri Federation has already moved their border stations further away from us. The truth was painful but simple. The galaxy was full of advanced civilizations, but none of them wanted to fight the Devourers. These machines had already destroyed 17 different worlds, and no one had found a way to stop them. The smart choice was to stay far away and hope the Devourers would be satisfied with what they had already eaten, but the Cathara had nowhere to run. This was their only world, their only home. 7 billion crystal beings lived here, each one unique and irreplaceable. Their children, barely formed and still learning to sing their first songs. Their elders, who held the memories of 1,000,000 years of peace. Their artists, their teachers, their dreamers, all of them would be consumed within days. There must be something we haven't tried, Memory of Song said. But her voice held no hope. Resonance - Hope looked at the equipment around him. The central spire contained the most powerful communication array on the planet, designed to speak with civilizations across the galaxy. They had already sent messages to every major power, every military force, every trading federation they could reach. The answers were always the same. We are sorry for your loss. There is nothing we can do. But perhaps they had not asked everyone. Memory of Songs, he said slowly. What do we know about the Outer Rim territories? The worlds that are not part of the major federations? Very little, she replied. Most of them are considered primitive or dangerous. The civilized worlds avoid them. Dangerous how? Some have violent weather. Others have poisonous air. There are worlds with crushing gravity, intense radiation, or creatures that kill without reason. The galactic databases mark them as unsuitable for civilized life. Resonance of Hope felt something stir in his crystal heart. Perhaps civilized beings could not help them. But what about uncivilized ones? What about beings who lived with danger every day? He began working at the communication array, adjusting the frequencies to reach further out into space. Instead of sending targeted messages to known civilizations, he would broadcast widely, hoping someone, anyone, might hear them and respond. "What are you doing?" Memory of Songs asked. "I am sending our plea to the stars themselves," he replied. "To anyone who might listen, civilized or not." The message he crafted was simple but complete. He explained who the Kithara were, where they lived, and what threatened them. He included their coordinates and detailed information about the Devourers. He added mathematical proofs and scientific data that any advanced species could understand. Most importantly, he made it clear that they were facing complete extinction. The message went out in all directions, carried by quantum waves that could travel faster than light. It would reach dozens of worlds, hundreds of listening posts, thousands of ships traveling between the stars. Most would ignore it. Many would not even understand it. But perhaps someone, somewhere, would care enough to help. Hours passed. The Devourers continued their advance, now visible from the central spire as a dark line moving slowly but steadily toward the last crystal cities. Reports came in from the outer settlements, each one ending in static as the communication centers were consumed. Then, just as Resonance of Hope was beginning to lose hope, a response came through the array. The message was short and used simple language, but it came from a world listed in their databases as Class 12, Deathworld. Extreme caution advised. The message said, "We heard you. Help is coming. Don't give up." Memory of Songs looked at the data. This transmission came from a system called Sol, the third planet from their star. According to our records, it's covered in water and has an oxygen atmosphere with dangerous weather patterns. What kind of beings live there? Unknown. Our surveys marked it as too dangerous to visit. Resonance of Hope stared at the message. Someone from a world so dangerous that the galactic community avoided it had just promised to help them. It seemed impossible. How could beings from such a place even survive, let alone travel between stars? But as another crystal city went dark on their sensors, consumed by the advancing Devourers, he realized that impossible help was better than no help at all. "Send a reply," he told Memory of Songs. "Tell them our exact location and how much time we have left." Outside the window, the purple sky was growing darker as smoke rose from the dying cities. But for the first time in days, Resonance of Hope allowed himself a small flicker of light. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of the heavy cruiser Indomitable, staring at the holographic display that showed a dying world 700 light-years away. The alien message had been playing on repeat for the past 6 hours, and each time she heard it, her jaw tightened a little more. "Play it again." "Martinez," she ordered. The communications officer touched his panel, and the translated voice filled the room. It spoke of crystal beings, of machine devourers, of billions of innocent lives about to be snuffed out. The mathematical data that followed painted a picture of technological horrors that had already consumed 17 civilizations. "Ma'am," said Colonel Marcus Webb, commander of the 3rd Colonial Marines, "Earth Command has been very clear. We're not authorized to engage in conflicts outside our territorial zone." Chun turned to look at him. Webb was a big man with scars on his face from fighting insurgents on mining worlds. His Marines had spent the last 5 years putting down rebellions on frontier planets, where normal people couldn't even breathe the air. If anyone understood what it meant to fight impossible odds, it was him. "Colonel," she said quietly, "how do you feel about following orders when those orders mean watching billions of innocents die?" Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Ma'am, I think maybe we should develop a communications problem with Earth Command. Technical difficulties, you understand." "Funny thing," Chun replied. "I was just thinking the same thing." The Indomitable was the flagship of the 4th Colonial Fleet, currently stationed at Kepler Station on the edge of human space. With her were 11 other ships, 3 heavy cruisers, 5 destroyers, and 3 troop transports carrying 8,000 colonial marines. They had been preparing for a routine patrol mission along the frontier. Now they were preparing for something very different. "Captain Rodriguez," Chun called to her science officer. "What do we know about these Devourer machines?" "According to the alien data, they're self-replicating constructs," Rodriguez replied, pulling up technical readouts. "Each one is roughly the size of a small building. They consume matter to create more units. Energy weapons are ineffective due to adaptive shielding that changes to counter whatever attacks them." "What about their tactics?" "They advance slowly but steadily. No apparent command structure. Each unit seems to operate independently, but with perfect coordination. They ignore attempts at communication and show no interest in anything except consumption." Webb studied the data with the eye of someone who had fought machines before. "They sound like the mining robots we faced on Titan 7, except much bigger and much smarter." "How did you beat the Titan 7 robots?" Chun asked. "We got up close and personal," Webb said. "Turns out robots are really good at long-range combat and terrible at dealing with someone who climbs on their back and starts taking them apart with a plasma torch." Before Chun could respond, the communications array chimed with an incoming message. The face that appeared on screen was dignified and aristocratic, with the pale blue skin and large eyes of an Altarian. "Human vessel indomitable," the alien said. "This is Chancellor Veltar of the Altarian hegemony. We have intercepted your communications regarding the Cathara situation." "Chancellor," Chun replied formally, "how can we help you?" "I am contacting you to express our concern about your apparent plans to engage the Devourer swarm. While we appreciate your noble intentions, I must stress that these entities have destroyed 17 advanced civilizations. Even our combined fleets, with technology far superior to your own, would not dare engage them directly." Chun kept her voice level. "I appreciate your concern, Chancellor. Admiral Chun, your species is still young and perhaps does not understand the scope of this threat. The Devourers adapt to any strategy, any weapon, any tactic. They are perfect predators. Your small fleet, no matter how brave, cannot succeed where thousands of our vessels would fail." Webb stepped closer to the screen. "With respect, Chancellor, have you ever actually fought these things? Or did you just run calculations and decide it was impossible?" The Altarian's expression grew cold. "Colonel, we are not cowards. We simply understand reality. Mathematics does not lie." "No, sir, it doesn't," Webb replied. "But mathematics also can't account for pure human stubbornness." Chem held up a hand to silence her Marine commander. "Chancellor, we appreciate your advice. But these beings asked for help, and we're going to give it to them." "Admiral," Veltar said, his voice taking on a pleading tone, "you must understand. The Devourers have never been defeated. Every species that has faced them has either fled or been consumed. This is not a battle you can win with bravery alone." Chun looked at the display showing her small fleet, then at the data about the massive Devourer swarm. The numbers were indeed terrible. 12 human ships against thousands of adaptive machines. 8,000 Marines against an enemy that had already consumed billions. "Chancellor," she said finally, "you're probably right. But here's the thing about humans. We don't fight to win pretty. We fight to win, period. And sometimes the only way to win is to be too stupid to know when you're beaten." The transmission ended with the Chancellor shaking his head sadly. "Well," Webb said, "that was diplomatic." "Martinez," Chung called to her communications officer, "send word to all ships. We're moving out in 2 hours. Full combat load, extended deployment configuration." "Ma'am," came the voice of Captain Torres from the destroyer Relentless. "What's our mission profile?" Chun looked around the command center at her officers. These were men and women who had volunteered for colonial service, who had spent years fighting in places where most humans couldn't survive. They had faced down rebel armies, hostile aliens, and the deadly environments of frontier worlds. They were used to impossible odds. "Our mission," she said, "is to show the galaxy what happens when you ask Earth for help and Earth says yes." Over the next 2 hours, the Fourth Colonial Fleet prepared for a journey that would take them further from home than any human force had ever traveled. The Marines checked their equipment. The engineers made sure every system was running perfectly. And the medical teams prepared for casualties. As they prepared to jump into hyperspace, Chun received one more message from the crystal world. The alien voice was weaker now, more desperate. "Human ships," it said. "The Devourers have reached the outer cities. We estimate 36 hours before total extinction. Please hurry." Chun looked at the tactical display. 700 light years through hyperspace, avoiding the major shipping lanes to prevent the Devourers from tracking them. Even pushing their engines to maximum, they would arrive with only hours to spare. "All ships," she broadcast to her fleet. "This is Admiral Chun. We're about to do something that every military expert in the galaxy thinks is impossible. We're going to save a world from an enemy that has never been beaten." She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. "But then again, we're humans. Impossible is just another word for Tuesday." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kithara system, and Admiral Chun felt her heart sink at what she saw on the tactical displays. The beautiful blue and purple world below was covered with dark patches that seemed to move and spread like infection. Orbital space was filled with geometric shapes that pulsed with evil light. The Devourer ships. "Jesus Christ," whispered Captain Rodriguez. "There must be thousands of them." Chun studied the sensor readings. Each Devourer construct was massive, angular, and clearly artificial. They moved in perfect formation around the planet, some descending to the surface while others remained in orbit like mechanical vultures waiting for the feast to begin. "Admiral," Communications Officer Martinez called out, "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's weak, but I think I can clean it up. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was strange, like the sound of wind chimes mixed with breaking glass. But the translation software worked, and soon Chun could understand the words. "Human ships, this is Resonance of Hope speaking from the central spire of Harmony's End. Are you truly here to help us?" Chun activated her transmitter. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Earth Colonial Fleet. We received your message, and we're here to stop these machines." There was a pause, then a sound that might have been sobbing. "We had given up hope. So many have already been lost. Can you truly fight the Devourers?" "We're about to find out," Chun replied. "Can you establish a visual link?" The main screen flickered, then showed the interior of what looked like a crystal cave. Standing in the center was a being that took Chun's breath away. Resonance of Hope looked like a living sculpture made of pure sapphire, with light flowing through his transparent body like liquid starlight. He was beautiful in a way that made human art seem clumsy and primitive, but he was also clearly dying. His light was dim and flickering, and there were cracks in his crystal skin. "By the stars," Resonance of Hope whispered, staring at the humans on his screen. "What manner of beings are you?" Chun realized that this was the first time the crystal being had seen humans. She tried to imagine how they must look to someone so beautiful, crude creatures of meat and bone, scarred from countless battles, adapted to survive in conditions that would kill most civilized species. "We're from Earth," she said simply. "It's a dangerous world, so we learn to be dangerous too." Another crystal being moved into view, this one with a softer glow that reminded Chun of moonlight. "I am Memory of Songs," she said. "We have studied your world in our databases. Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world. How do you survive in such conditions? Colonel Webb stepped forward, his battle-scarred face serious. Ma'am, those conditions made us. High gravity gave us strong bones. Poisonous atmosphere taught us to build better technology. Violent weather showed us how to work together. Predators taught us how to fight. But surely your people live in protected cities, away from the dangers? Resonance of Hope asked. Webb smiled grimly. Some do. But Marines like us, we volunteer to go to the worst places, mining worlds with crushing gravity, planets with acid rain, moons where the radiation would cook most species. We don't avoid danger. We look for it. The crystal beings exchanged glances that somehow conveyed shock without facial expressions. Why? Memory of Songs asked. Because someone has to, Chun replied. Because there are always people who need help in places too dangerous for anyone else to go. Resonance of Hope's light grew a little brighter. Tell us about these devourers. We have tried everything we know to stop them. Chun pulled up the tactical data. Show us what you've attempted. For the next hour, the Cathara explained their efforts to defeat the machines. They had tried energy weapons, but the Devourers adapted their armor to absorb any frequency. They had attempted to disrupt the machines with sonic attacks, but the Devourers changed their internal structure to resist. They had even tried to communicate, thinking perhaps these beings could be reasoned with. They adapt to everything, Resonance of Hope said sadly. Every strategy we use, they counter within minutes. They are perfect predators. Webb studied the data with the eyes of someone who had fought adaptive enemies before. Perfect predators, huh? That might be their weakness right there. How do you mean? Memory of Songs asked. Perfect systems have perfect weaknesses, Webb explained. They're designed to handle everything they expect to face. But what happens when they face something they've never seen before? Something so crazy that their programming doesn't have a response for it? Chun was beginning to understand. You're thinking about the Titan 7 mining robots. Exactly. Those robots were designed to handle industrial accidents, equipment failures, even armed insurgents with standard weapons. But they had no protocols for dealing with Marines who would climb onto their backs and start taking them apart with hand tools. Resonance of Hope looked confused. But surely your weapons are more sophisticated than hand tools? Sometimes, Webb said. But sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't expect. These Devourers have probably faced thousands of civilized species with advanced technology. They've adapted to energy weapons, smart missiles, electronic warfare, everything a modern military might use. But have they ever faced beings crazy enough to ram their ships into enemy vessels? Chun added, have they fought soldiers who consider a 90% casualty rate an acceptable loss if the mission succeeds? Have they encountered a species that treats impossible odds as a personal challenge? The crystal beings were quiet for a long moment. You would truly sacrifice your ships? Memory of Songs asked. If necessary, Chun replied. We came here to save your people. Everything else is just details. And your Marines would attack these machines directly without long-range support. Webb grinned, and it was not a pleasant expression. Ma'am, my Marines have been known to continue fighting after their life support fails. Some of them actually prefer hand-to-hand combat. They think ranged weapons are for people who don't really want to win. Resonance of Hope's light flickered with what might have been hope. But the mathematics of survival. The mathematics say you should have been dead 3 days ago, Chun interrupted. But you're still here, still fighting, still hoping someone would answer your call. Mathematics are useful, but they can't measure the human refusal to quit when quitting would be smart. On the tactical display, the Devour Swarm continued its steady advance toward the last crystal cities. Time was running out. Resonance of Hope, Chun said. We need to know everything about your world's defenses. Every weapon, every shelter, every possible advantage. We're going to make our stand here, and we're going to win. How can you be so certain? Chun looked at the beautiful, dying being on her screen, someone whose entire civilization was about to be wiped out by machines that had never been defeated. Then she looked around her command center at the scarred, determined faces of her crew. Because, she said quietly, you asked for help. And where we come from, that's all the reason we need. The battle began at dawn over Harmony's End. And it began in a way that no military analyst in the galaxy would have recommended. Instead of forming a defensive line, or attempting to outmaneuver the massive Devourer constructs, Admiral Chun ordered her ships to charge straight into the heart of the enemy formation. The Indomitable led the way, her hull gleaming in the light of the alien sun as she accelerated toward the largest cluster of enemy vessels. All ships, engage at close range, Chun commanded. Remember, these machines adapt to patterns. Don't give them a pattern to adapt to. On the bridge of the heavy cruiser Relentless, Captain Torres watched his tactical display with growing amazement. The Devourer ships were massive geometric shapes that pulsed with energy, each one easily 3 times the size of his vessel. Their adaptive shielding flickered as it analyzed the incoming human ships, preparing to counter whatever weapons they might use. The Devourers had clearly fought many battles. Their formations were perfect, their spacing optimal, their targeting systems already locking onto the approaching human vessels. Every tactical algorithm said the humans should be destroyed within minutes, but the humans weren't fighting according to any algorithm. Target their shield generators with kinetic rounds, Torres ordered. Load the manual firing tubes, no computer assistance. His weapons officer looked confused. Sir, kinetic rounds are ineffective against adaptive armor. Not if they don't know what hit them, Torres replied. Fire random patterns, no targeting computer, no fire control system, just point and shoot like we're hunting pirates. The Relentless opened fire with simple metal slugs launched at high velocity. The Devourer ship's shields adapted quickly, hardening against kinetic impact. But before the adaptation was complete, Torres ordered his ship to ram the nearest enemy vessel. The collision sent shockwaves through both ships, but the Relentless was built for rough conditions. Her reinforced hull, designed to survive asteroid fields and debris storms, held together as she ground against the alien construct. The Devourer ship's perfect armor was not designed for such crude tactics. Boarding parties away. Torres shouted as his Marines launched themselves from airlocks directly onto the enemy vessel. Colonel Webb led the assault from the Indomitable. His power armor locked onto the hull of a Devourer construct as it spun through space. Around him, 300 Marines used magnetic clamps and plasma torches to cut their way inside the alien ship. Remember your training, he called over the comm system. These machines adapt to weapons, but they don't adapt to Marines who refuse to die. The inside of the Devourer ship was a maze of corridors filled with moving machinery. The walls themselves seemed to shift and change as the vessel tried to adapt to the human intrusion. But the machines had been designed to counter energy weapons and computer viruses, not soldiers who fought with improvised weapons and pure determination. Marine Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez found herself face to face with a repair drone the size of a small car. Her plasma rifle had stopped working when the ship adapted its internal environment to absorb energy weapons. So she picked up a piece of broken machinery and used it as a club. Adapt to this, she growled, smashing the drone's optical sensors with a chunk of alien metal. Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Marines used crowbars to pry open control panels. They threw grenades that were nothing more than metal containers filled with explosive chemicals. When their sophisticated equipment failed, they resorted to tools that had been used by humans for thousands of years: hammers, knives, and simple determination. The Devourer constructs adaptive systems went into overload. How do you counter an enemy who considers a broken communications array to be an acceptable weapon? How do you adapt to beings who continue fighting when their life support systems fail? In space, Admiral Chun watched as her fleet took devastating damage. The destroyer Fearless had lost her entire forward section, but continued firing with her remaining guns. The cruiser Dauntless was venting atmosphere from 17 hull breaches, but her crew had sealed themselves into individual compartments and kept fighting. "Admiral," Communications Officer Martinez called out. "The Cathar are asking how they can help." Chun looked at the tactical display. Half her fleet was damaged or destroyed, but the Devour formation was beginning to show signs of confusion. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable was breaking down as individual ships struggled to counter human tactics that made no sense. "Tell them to target any Devourer ship that's spinning out of control," she ordered. "Use their harmonic weapons on ships that are already damaged." On the planet's surface, Resonance of Hope and Memory of Songs watched the battle through their sensors. The human ships were fighting in a way that violated every principle of space combat they knew. Instead of maintaining safe distances and using long-range weapons, they were ramming enemy vessels and sending soldiers to fight inside alien ships. "They're going to get themselves killed," Memory of Song said. "Yes," Resonance of Hope replied, "but they're taking the Devourers with them." The tide of battle turned when Sergeant Rodriguez made a discovery inside the Devourer ship. The adaptation algorithms that made the machines so dangerous were controlled by quantum processors that could predict and counter any logical tactical response. But the processors had never encountered an enemy whose tactics were based on controlled chaos rather than logical planning. "Colonel," she called over the comm, "I think I found their brain. It's trying to figure out why we're not retreating when we should be dead. Can you destroy it?" Rodriguez looked at the quantum processor, a beautiful crystal structure that pulsed with mathematical perfection. Her demolition charges had been neutralized by the ship's adaptive systems. Her plasma torch wouldn't cut through the protective barriers. But she still had one weapon the ship couldn't adapt to. She took off her helmet and threw it as hard as she could at the processor. The impact cracked the crystal matrix, and the entire ship shuddered as its adaptation systems crashed. Throughout the Devourer fleet, similar breakdowns began occurring. The machine's perfect efficiency became a weakness when faced with an enemy that fought harder when they were losing, that advanced when retreating would be logical, that sang war songs while bleeding out in vacuum. The remaining Devourer ships began to retreat, their hive mind algorithms unable to process the concept of a species that considered impossible odds to be a personal challenge rather than a reason to surrender. As the last enemy construct fled into deep space, Admiral Chun looked around her ruined command center. The Indomitable's bridge was filled with smoke and sparks. Half her crew was wounded, and her ship was barely holding together. But they had won. "All ships report," she ordered. The responses painted a picture of devastation. 7 ships destroyed, 3 others crippled beyond repair, over 4,000 casualties. By any reasonable military standard, the 4th Colonial Fleet had been destroyed, but the Kithara were alive. "Admiral Chun," came the voice of Resonance of Hope, now stronger and brighter than before. "How can we ever thank you?" Chun looked at the tactical display, showing her broken fleet and the planet below, where 7 billion crystal beings would live to see another day. "You already did," she said quietly. "You asked for help when everyone else said it was hopeless. That was thanks enough." 3 days after the battle, Admiral Chun stood in the crystal gardens of Harmony's End, watching the Cathara rebuild their world. The beautiful beings moved through the ruins of their cities like living light, their songs of restoration creating new crystal growth from the ashes of the old. It was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. And it hurt to look at. not because the Cathara were too bright to watch, but because she knew the price that had been paid for their survival. "The final casualty reports are in, Admiral," Colonel Webb said quietly. He stood beside her with his left arm in a crystal-grown cast, courtesy of Cathara medical technology. 4,217 dead. Another 800 wounded, but expected to recover. Chun nodded without speaking. She had read every name on the casualty list, had written letters to families she would never meet, had made the calculations that every military commander dreaded. More than half her force was gone. "Any word from the rest of the galaxy?" she asked. "Oh yes," Webb replied with a grim smile. "The Galactic Council has been very busy. Seems everyone wants to know how we did what we did." Resonance of Hope approached them, his crystal body now glowing with renewed health. Where before he had been dim and flickering, he now shone like a sapphire in sunlight. Behind him came Memory of Songs and dozens of other Cathara, each one alive because humans have refused to let them die. "Admiral Chun," Resonance of Hope said, his voice carrying the musical tones of hope renewed. "The Galactic Council wishes to speak with you." "They are confused by what happened here." Chun almost smiled. "I imagine they are. The communication array in the Crystal Spire connected them to the Council chambers on Altair Prime." Chancellor Veltar appeared on the screen, his blue face showing an expression that might have been awe or terror. "Admiral Chun," the Chancellor began, "we have reviewed the battle recordings provided by the Cathara. What you accomplished here defies every military principle known to civilized warfare. Is that a criticism, Chancellor?" "No," Veltar replied slowly. "It is an admission that we may have underestimated your species. The Devourers had never been defeated in direct combat. 17 civilizations fell to them using conventional military tactics. We don't do conventional," Webb muttered. The Chancellor heard him. "Indeed, Colonel. Your tactics were unprecedented, ramming capital ships into enemy vessels, boarding actions in the vacuum of space, using improvised weapons when your technology failed." He paused. "Fighting harder when you were losing, rather than retreating when survival demanded it." Chun looked around at the crystal beings who surrounded them. Children who were barely formed jewels of light. Elders whose glow held the memories of millions of years. Artists and teachers and dreamers who would live because humans had decided that some things were worth dying for. "Chancellor," she said, "I need to ask you something. When the Cathara sent out their plea for help, why didn't your people respond? You have thousands of ships, advanced technology, military forces that could have made a difference." Veltar's expression grew uncomfortable. "Admiral, the mathematical certainty of defeat was overwhelming. We could not justify the loss of ships and lives in a hopeless cause. But it wasn't hopeless. The mathematics said it was." Chun felt anger rise in her chest. "The mathematics didn't account for one thing, Chancellor. They didn't account for the fact that these people asked for help. And when someone asks for help, you don't run calculations about whether it's worth the risk. You just help." Memory of Songs moved closer to the human officers. "Admiral, there is something we must show you. Something we have created in your honor." She led them to the highest tower of the central spire, where a new crystal formation had been grown. It was different from the others. Instead of the pure, clear crystal of Cathara architecture, this one was clouded and complex, with veins of darker material running through it like scars. "We call it Deathworld's Promise," Memory of Songs explained. "It contains a small beacon with the coordinates to your world and a simple message. For those who need help and have nowhere else to turn." Resonance of Hope's light pulsed with emotion. "We have sent the design to every world in the galaxy. Many have already begun construction. When other species face impossible odds, they will know where to send their pleas." Chun stared at the crystal monument. It wasn't beautiful in the way that other Cathara creations were beautiful. It was rough, scarred, imperfect, like the humans who had inspired it. But it was also strong in a way that perfect things could never be. "You don't understand what you've done," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" Resonance of Hope asked. "You're advertising Earth as the place to call when no one else will help. Do you know how many desperate messages we're going to receive? How many impossible situations we'll be asked to resolve?" The crystal beings exchanged glances. Then Resonance of Hope began to sing, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but somehow carrying infinite sadness and infinite hope. "Admiral," he said when the song ended, "we have learned something about your species in the past few days. You do not help because it is easy or profitable or safe. You help because it is right. And beings who help because it is right do not stop helping when the requests become difficult." Chancellor Veltar, still connected through the communication array, spoke carefully. "Admiral, the Galactic Council would like to offer humanity membership in the Galactic Defense Initiative. Your unique combat philosophy might prove valuable in future crises." Chun almost laughed. "Let me guess. You want us to be your attack dogs. Call in the humans when you need someone to do something dangerous and stupid. We prefer to think of it as consulting specialists in impossible scenarios." Webb stepped forward, his scarred face serious. "Chancellor, let me explain something about humans. We don't fight because we like it. We fight because someone has to. And when we fight, we don't stop until the job is done or we're all dead." "We understand," Veltar replied. "That is precisely why we need you." Chun looked out over the Crystal City, where the Cathara continued their songs of rebuilding. 7 billion lives that would continue because a small human fleet had been too stubborn to accept defeat. In the distance, the remains of her ships hung in orbit, metal coffins holding the bodies of Marines who had died so that beautiful strangers could live. "We'll consider your offer," she said finally. "But understand one thing. If we accept, we do this our way. No interference, no second-guessing, no political considerations. When someone calls for help, we answer. Period." "Agreed," the Chancellor said quickly as the communication ended. Chun turned to find Resonance of Hope watching her with an expression that somehow conveyed deep understanding despite his alien features. "You carry their weight," he said softly. "All those who died to save us. Every good commander does. But you will carry it differently than others would. You will not let their sacrifice be meaningless. When the next cry for help comes from somewhere in the darkness, you will answer." Chun nodded, looking once more at the crystal monument that would tell the galaxy where to find help when hope was gone. It was a burden she hadn't asked for, but one she would accept, because that's what humans did. When someone asked for help, you helped. Even when it cost everything. Even when the mathematics said it was impossible. Even when you were the only ones crazy enough to try. Somewhere in the vast galaxy, another species was probably facing extinction at this very moment. And soon they would learn about a small blue world where beings of meat and bone had turned stubbornness into an art form. When their plea went to the stars, the Deathworlders would answer.